Have you ever gotten to a point in your life where you just felt stuck? You felt like you were spinning your wheels. Maybe you were caught in quicksand, stuck in the mud. We've all been there at some point in time. If you have, stick around because I've got a few suggestions for you. Hi, if we've not met before, I'm Shelley from Taming Frenzy. Now, if you are one of those lucky people who has never felt stuck in your life, first off, I envy you. You have my sincere congratulations and my absolute, jealousy. And frankly, you can go ahead and scoot on because you really don't need this video if that's the case. Boy, do I envy you. However, most of us have probably reached a point at some time in our life when we examine things, we examined our lives, our jobs, our relationships, our own personal self-being, and it came up lacking, and we just felt stuck, and we didn't really know what we needed to do to get unstuck. Being stuck is not a fun feeling. Well, when we feel like that, we tend to have this feeling that I'm going to be stuck here forever. Things are never, ever going to change. They're never going to get any better. It's always going to be this bad. It's always going to just be crummy. Woe is me. Things are just going to be awful. You can write the scenario, right? The thing is, you're not stuck completely unless you decide that you're going to be stuck completely. That choice is yours. The first thing to do is when you are feeling stuck and frustrated and all that, is it's so tempting to look at other people, especially with social media. We get on our phones and we start scrolling, and everybody else's life looks great. They're going here, they're going there, they're doing this, they just got that. They look wonderful. Social media presents a very distorted view of what life is really like for other people. They're not going to post the bad stuff that's going on. Everybody just posts the good stuff. But when you feel stuck in your own life, it's easy to look at all of that and start playing the comparison game. Nobody wins the comparison game. So do yourself a favor. Quit playing. The next thing is when you realize that you're feeling stuck and you're frustrated and you're unhappy, is you need to accept that probably it's time for a change. In fact, it's probably past time for a change, to be real honest. So at points in my life when I have found myself stuck, I have found it helpful to do a life assessment. Now, there are lots of different life assessments out there that you can find on different websites and in books and all those kind of things. I came up with one for myself, I don't know, probably 15 years ago or more, that I synthesized from a lot of reading that I had done, and I condensed it into a version that works for me, and I've got an acronym that helps me to remember that, and I'm going to share that with you. But I use this as the basis when I am feeling stuck and needing to make some changes in my life. And the acronym is PRIME, okay? And PRIME stands for what I think are the key areas of our life. It stands for our physical self, our relationships, our inner self, or our intellectual, development. It stands for our money, and it also stands for escape. Now, I have seen these listed out in other ways and other forms. This is one that spoke to me, I guess because I developed it and it's just what worked for me. But this pretty much covers all of the different areas. And so when you start doing a life assessment, your first thing is to figure out where you are. Now, I probably shouldn't tell this story on myself, but since I have no self-respect and never have been smart enough to keep my mouth shut, I'm just going to tell you why it's important to figure out where you are. Back in the dark ages, when I was in high school and, pretty young, there was a local spot out, on the periphery of town where the teenagers tended to go. It was a makeout spot. You know what I'm talking about. I'd never been out there, but I was almost old enough to drive, and I was at the age where people weren't really bothering you if you were driving a little bit before 16, and it was a little bitty town. Nobody paid that much attention to it. And I had a friend who was with me one evening, and we were out driving around like kids do. And so I mentioned that I'd never been out to this place, and she said, "Oh, you got to go." So she took me out there. I was driving a 1959 Ranchero, believe it or not, with no power steering and no power brakes. Well, we got out there to this spot. She gave me the directions. We went out there. It really was just almost right there on the edge of town. I managed to, with that low-slung 59 Ranchero, I managed to hang high center, and all of a sudden I was stuck. I couldn't go forward. I couldn't go backward because my wheels weren't touching the ground. Well, this was back in the days when everybody had a CB radio in their car and their truck and all of that. That dates me. You can probably guess when that was. So I get on the CB radio and I start calling for my dad and telling him, Dad, I'm out with my friend and we're stuck. Well, of course, the first thing he starts asking me is, where are you? Well, I was too stupid to tell him the nickname for the teenage hangout spot we were at. And so I started trying to describe where I think we are. And it's totally dark, but off over here I can see the lights of a gas station, okay, off over this direction. And I figure, okay, that's one point. Well, I'm at this point. And then I can see the lights of something else off over here. I don't even remember what. It's been so long ago. But in my mind, my stupid mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in between those 2 points because here's the gas station. Here's this other place that I know where it is. And I'm in between, not thinking about it being a triangle. And so I tell him, well, Daddy, I'm in between the gas station and the water tower. So he gets out in his pickup with his CB on the whole time, communicating with me, driving around trying to find where my friend and I are stuck. Well, he keeps asking me and saying, I'm driven up and down between there. I can't find you. Tell me something else about where you are. Well, this goes back and forth for a while. The upshot was, finally my friend said, tell your daddy we're at this spot. And when I did that, he immediately knew where we were. But of course, other people in the town, especially one of his best friends, was really sitting there laughing as my daddy is saying, Shelley, where are you? Obviously, I was stupid, and that was, a problem. That was my problem. Never was good with directions and all that. Still can't do left and right. But the point was, if I had known where I was, I could have told him how to come get me and help get me unstuck. So that's the first key, is figure out, where are you? Okay. So when I'm ready to do a life assessment, I look at all of these different areas, and I'll just kind of explain to you how I use them. You can take and modify them or go find something else that works for you the best. But when I'm thinking about my life and I'm looking at the physical, I start thinking about things like my health, my appearance, the way I look, my activity level, my wardrobe. And this is not meant to be something shallow. This is not, are you asking yourself, do I feel beautiful enough or any of that kind of stuff? This is just taking an assessment of your physical body and where you are. And the other reason I do this is how you look and feel and all those things. It affects the way you present yourself to the world and the way you feel about yourself. Obviously, if your health is in bad shape and if you're feeling lousy all the time and you have no energy, or you feel like you look in the mirror and you look like your grandmother because your clothes are out of date and frumpy, all of those things are going to make a difference in how you feel about yourself and present yourself to the world. And I'll give you another example here. One time back when my daughter was still in high school, I was doing a closet clean out to make some donations. And we were pulling everything out and just trying things on. And she was helping me, giving me her opinion. And at one point she said to me, Mom, do you realize nearly everything in your closet is black? And I kind of looked at all the stuff on the bed that was still there and the stuff that we'd put back in the closet. And sure enough, she was right. I had gotten into a real clothing rut and everything I owned was black. And I realized, golly, no wonder I feel drab and dowdy and all that I never wear any color. So I made a point to change that. But I might not have realized that had my daughter not pointed it out. Hopefully at some point I might have got smart, but you never know with me. But all of these type of things, if you're frustrated with your makeup or your hair or any of those kind of things, whatever it be, this all relates to your physical body. Then the next is to evaluate your relationships with your spouse, your kids, if you have any, with older parents, with siblings, extended family, with your friends, community, co-workers, etc. Evaluate those relationships. Are you happy and satisfied and content with the quality and even the quantity? If not, you need to start thinking about what are some things you need to do to improve those. And then to me, this one right here is really one of the biggest ones, the inner self and the intellectual. And I group a lot of things into this particular category. To me, this is really one of the great big ones. And it includes things like your spiritual development, your intellectual development, to me, reading and personal growth come off under this. It also is your creativity, your job or your business, everything that relates to growing, learning, becoming a better person, more enlightened, whatever that is for you, comes under this category. Then money, of course, obviously, none of us can get by without the money. And so under this, I tend to look at things like our budget, our debt, look at your wealth building activities that you're doing, look at your assets, look at your emergency fund. And I also include my house under this. And the reason is because this, let's face it, for most of us, our house is one of the biggest money sucks that we've got, right? For example, in the last 2 weeks alone, we have had a hot water heater go out in the master bathroom. We had a major plumbing issue again that we had to deal with. We've had a heating element go out in the oven. We've got a couple of elements on the stove that we're looking at and thinking, not sure how much longer this is going to last. And we know we've got a hot water heater that's going to need to be replaced before too long, because everybody, when they go to wash dishes, makes a comment about the water has to get turned on and circulate around the block about 5 or 6 times before it warms up enough. So we know that's coming. Your home is one of the biggest money drains frequently, but it's one of the biggest expenditures that you're going to have. So that's why I include everything home related, whether it's repairs, maintenance, improvement, decor, all of those things come under the money category. And then escape. And a lot of times this is an area that we get frustrated in because we're putting it on the back burner and we're ignoring it. Especially as women, we tend to neglect this area way too much. But for me, this is downtime. This is time to rest and relax. I try to make sure I've got time to read, to spend time with my family. This is something important. Don't put this on the back burner. No matter what your stage or age is, everybody needs some escape time. It may be escape with family or friends. It may be escape into solitude where there's nobody else that you're worrying about except just a little downtime and relaxation for yourself. So that's basically my prime system that I just wanted to share about, so that maybe it might help you a little bit too. So your first step when you're feeling frustrated and you're feeling stuck is to do that life assessment. Use that system if you want. Find others. There are others out there. But determine, where are you right now? So I use this system to help me do life assessments. And then there are 3 basic questions. 1, where am I? Which we've already just talked about. The second one is, where do I want to be? And then the third question is, how do I get there? So once we have done the assessment and we have figured out where we are, and we've analyzed all those key components that make up our life, now we can start thinking about and focusing on, where is it we really want to be? Now, you'd think this would be easy, that we'd all have some perfect vision in our life of what we'd like, but a lot of times it's harder than we really want to accept that it is, for several reasons. For one thing, a lot of times as women, we have kind of been conditioned to accept, to go along with the status quo, to not rock the boat. We may have felt confined or constrained or even stifled a little bit. Many of us were not the girls who were encouraged and told we could go out and do anything or be anything we wanted to. And so we may have kind of stuffed a lot of those goals and dreams and things that we wanted. We may have kind of stuffed them away in a corner and kind of forgotten about them because life was hectic and busy and other things were coming first at that point in time. So determining where you want to be may be harder than you think it's going to be, but it doesn't have to be. The answer to where do you want to be is to let yourself dream, to give yourself permission to sit someplace and just close your eyes and think about what it would be like in your perfect world. Or if you could do or be or have anything that you wanted, what would those things be? And you can make vision boards. I've got a blog post or 2 about creating vision boards. You can find lots of those out there and buy vision boards and find vision boards on Canva and other programs like that you can fill in. But another thing you can do is to go back to the prime, and you can set yourself basically some goals for each of these different components of life. For example, if you want to improve your health, you might set some goals there. For example, one of mine is I want to increase my activity level. I have stage 4 cancer. that affects my activity sometime, but I also know that I need to be more active or as active as I can be, because that will help me stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So let yourself dream a little bit, and don't limit yourself by telling yourself, oh, well, that could never happen. That's not even possible. Because all that's doing is shutting off those things and ideas that might come to you. Nobody says that they can't happen. Don't tell yourself that they can't happen. A quote that I used to share with my students a long time ago was, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And I think that's very true. So do not limit yourself or tell yourself that things cannot happen for you, because you don't know that. Now, I've encouraged you to set the goals in all those different areas. That's how you determine where you want to be. Your goal may be that you want to be much healthier and more active. Your goal may be that you want to upgrade your appearance. You want to upgrade your wardrobe. You want to upgrade and level up your makeup and your hair so that you feel and look younger. You may want to work on strengthening some relationships, or even forming some relationships if you've got some that are missing. There's nothing wrong with that. You may decide that you need more time for your own personal spiritual growth or intellectual growth. You may decide you need to get a budget set so that you can reach some financial goals that you've got. And you may set some escape goals. For example, I would love to make a return trip to the beach at some point. So set yourself some goals in all those different life areas. But here's the big thing, okay? Don't try to achieve or change all of those things at one time, because that is simply a recipe for failure and a recipe for frustration. And when you're already feeling stuck in those things, you don't need any more frustration in your life. Don't set yourself up to experience any. Then the final question is, once you know where you are, once you know where you want to go, your third question is, how do I get there? Well, the answer is usually something along the lines of, do something different. There's that old saying that insanity is to do the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result. It just doesn't happen. If you want to make some changes, if you want to get unstuck, you're going to have to do something different. But unfortunately, too many of us tend to cling to that comfort zone. We just don't want to get out of it. We're comfy and cozy where we are, and it's scary out there, and we're not sure what's going to happen, and there's uncertainty, So be willing to turn loose of that certainty. Be willing to take a chance. Be willing to see yourself differently. I've got a book that I highly recommend to people. It's called Be Your Future Self Now. It's an excellent book. I encourage you to pick that up and read it. I'll leave a link to that below. But be willing to see yourself differently. Be willing to not settle for the same old version of yourself that you've always been. You are smart. You are capable of growth. You are able to learn new things, which means you can change and go forward. You do not have to stay stuck. I had a boss that used to say that at a school she worked at, the principal's saying was always, you're not stuck. If you're not happy, you're not stuck. You're not a tree. You can always go somewhere else. So it's important to keep that in mind. We are not a tree. We are not planted with deep roots. We are not stuck. And finally, a thing to remember is to be willing to fail in your endeavor to get unstuck and to make some changes in your life. You have to be willing to accept failure. And if you are not willing to accept some failure, you're probably not going to make the changes that you want to. You have to be willing to fail in order to change anything. You have to be willing to get uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to make others uncomfortable too, if need be. That's hard for us a lot of times. We are so used to being the peacemakers and the ones who keep everybody happy and satisfied, and we keep that conflict from brewing and all of that. So for us to intentionally feel like I'm going to make somebody uncomfortable often is a real scary thing to us. We worry about, what will my husband think? What will my kids think? Oh my Lord, what will my parents think? What will my neighbors think? What will the folks at church think? What will they think at work? First off, here's something to always remember that I read in a book years ago, and it has always stuck with me. And it is this. You wouldn't worry so much about what people think of you if you realized how seldom they often do. So that's something good to remember. Most people are not nearly as worried about you and what you're doing as you think they are. The only ones that may truly be interested in what you're doing are obviously the people closest to you, which are the same people that you're going to worry the most about making uncomfortable and making them unhappy. But you are deserving of being able to make positive changes, of being able to change the direction of your life, to go forward towards something that makes you truly happy and lights you up. And when you're feeling stuck, when you've got that feeling of it'll just never get any stinking better, man, that's the clearest sign as I can think of as any that it is time to make a change. And the way to do that is to go through those questions. Where am I? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? I hope this has been helpful. I would love to know what kind of changes you are looking to make in your life and how it's coming along with this year. In the meantime, let's all tame some frenzy.